Shabbat Shalom and welcome. I'm Rabbi Ed Feinstein. This is Torah study for a Shabbos, and I'm delighted to welcome, as always, my dear friend, Rabbi Marc Gellman of South Florida. Marc, good morning, and Shabbat Shalom.
Today, Shabbat Shalom and Aziz and Pesach.
Aziz and Pesach. This is Shabbat HaGadol. This is the great Shabbos on which we celebrate the oncoming of Passover. And Pesach is the master story, the central holiday of our tradition, and it has within its celebration all the elements that make us a great people, the people we are. It is a family celebration, typically done at home. I know lots of folks go to a restaurant or a resort or even a synagogue for their Passover, for their Seder, but this is really a home holiday. This is a home holiday because this holiday commemorates a moment at home. It's our last night in Egyptian slavery. Tomorrow we're leaving. So we come dressed in our travel clothes. I went to a Seder once where we all sat on suitcases instead of sitting on chairs because they really wanted us to feel like we were leaving tomorrow morning. And this is our last meal in this hovel, in this slave quarters. It is a holiday which welcomes family. Children are welcome at the table, and they're given a voice. They're given a very important role in the ritual. They are to ask questions. And as we finish our study today, Rabbi Gellman has a wonderful reflection on children and the different kinds of human souls that sit with us at the Seder table and how we accommodate everyone and respect everyone's presence at the table. It's a holiday which involves food. In fact, that's what it is. It's a holiday when everything gets turned upside down. Kitchens are cleaned and food is put away and new food is brought out, and there's rules about what you can eat and what you can't eat. And the main principal ritual is a Seder, which is a feast. And the Seder night, that feast, is such a popular ritual. According to the surveys, it is the most popular ritual that Jews participate in around the world. And even those who are alienated from the community, far away from their families, not involved in Jewish life, will find their way to a Seder because there's something primal. And most of all, it is a story we tell. It is a story about slavery, about liberation, and it is a story that has such resonance. It's a story which talks about history and what we can expect from history, a God who is present, immanent in history, a God who has designs on human history. It's a story of good against evil and the power of those who protect life against the powers of those who would bring death and destruction. It is a question of freedom, and it resonates both in history, it resonates with our own personal experiences. All of us on some level are struggling to free ourselves from bondage of that which is false and reaching toward redemption, toward that which is true. It's a wonderful, wonderful ritual, and it's full with very, vivid rituals that we all know. So let's begin with something eminently practical, Marc. I'd like to begin with how to do it better. Because I know that people will come to me and they'll complain about, it's such a nice holiday. It promises so much, but it doesn't produce. So every year I have offered this, and I'll offer it again. I know that it's redundant, and I apologize, but then Judaism is redundant, and I can't apologize for that. But here is my official tips for a better Seder. There are 10 of them, and we'll do this television style, starting with number 10. For those who have people at their Seder, and everyone does, who complain that it's just too long, Rabbi, make it shorter. I discovered this in my own family, of course. And one year I got really frustrated with my dear brother-in-law. So I ran into the kitchen, got a kitchen timer, turned it to 1 hour. You can do it half an hour. You can do it 20 minutes. And I put the timer down in front of him. And I said, when it dings, we'll eat. And I discovered he became very happy. It's not the length of the Seder. It's the indeterminacy of the thing. Like, will it ever end? And knowing that it's going to end when this thing dings, that brought him a lot of comfort. That brought him a lot of help. So set an hour, set a time limit. I think an hour is good, but if your family is a little bit, you have little kids at the table, then do it in a more brief way. Set a time limit. That's number one. Number two, at the beginning, or number nine, rather, sorry, that was 10. Number nine, at the beginning of the Seder, there's a ritual called karpas. A green vegetable is eaten in commemoration of the coming of springtime. We'll talk about that in a moment. But instead of eating parsley, I don't know where we got this idea of parsley. The only people who eat parsley are people who eat at Denny's. You know, make it a salad. That's what it was originally in the ancient Greek symposium. We put out a big tray of crunchy vegetables, of crudité. We put out a tray of peppers and cucumbers and carrot sticks, and you put dips. Now, the Seder lets us use salt water, presumably for the tears of the slaves. Not so. The reason we use salt water, because it was the only salad dressing our poverty-stricken ancestors could afford. Try guacamole, or a little oil and vinegar, a good olive oil, something good, so that people have something to munch on during the conversation of the Seder. Number 8, this one I insist upon. Listen carefully. Rabbi Gellman and I are both distinguished or extinguished rabbis, you know. Yes. We know a lot about this tradition. Nowhere are you bidden and commanded to drink lousy wine. The only reason we drank Manischewitz or Shapiro's or Kedem or King David, all of these terrible wines, was because when we came to America, the only grapes we could find were Concord grapes, and the only way to drink Concord grape wine is to cut it with sugar. Don't do that. You can get really good wine these days. Get a nice aperitif for the first cup, a white for the second, a Cabernet Sauvignon for the third, and a dessert wine for the fourth. I guarantee you'll have a happier Seder. Number 7, invite questions. Let everyone, don't be afraid for digression. The Seder is all about digression, all about telling the story. Number 6, sing all the songs. Number 5, use a good Haggadah. I know that your family used Maxwell House. Everybody's family used Maxwell House. And as much as I like coffee, you can do better than the Maxwell House Seder. These days, there are all sorts of wonderful Haggadahs out there. Find one and go online. There is a site called Haggadahs.com. It's a wonderful group of people that have put together thousands of examples of what you can do with a Seder. It's delightful. Make the second night a little different. Do something different. Don't just do a rerun. Add something to it. Do a different discussion. Get to the second half. I have to confess that I was 17 years old before I discovered that the Seder did not end when my father loosened his belt, complimented my mother, and fell asleep, right, after dinner. There's a second half of the Seder. And the second half of the Seder is all about redemption, the Exodus that is yet to come. And then most important of these next two, take a few moments to prepare. We spend a lot of time getting ready with the meal and the food. Take a few moments to decide what you want to teach at your Seder table, what topics you want to talk about. I like to ask everybody to bring something, especially the kids. Bring a song lyric, bring a poem, bring a piece that you found in a magazine, bring an idea that is apropos of the conversation about slavery and freedom. And most of all, remember that you were there at the Seder to tell a story. Don't forget to tell the story in whatever language you need. When our kids were small, we used sock puppets. Let my people go. No. It's a lot of fun, right? When they got older, we still use sock puppets. It gets a little raunchier now. But we tell the story because it is our story. It is the story. Marc, what would you add to my list?
I'm overwhelmed because as soon as we're off air, I'm gonna tell Betty we need a sommelier for our Seder.
It's true.
Number 2, we're gonna have to get a timer. If I did an hour for a timer, the people would come with torches and pitchforks.
Do 20 minutes, but the point is it's not indeterminate.
Yeah, no, I get you. Look, I love it all. We used to use when the kids were young, and we still continue to do it. Betty's idea was a bag of plagues. She would collect different things for the plagues. Everyone had a bag. And when we did blood, they'd have to look in the bag and find the blood toy, and then a little frog toy. And each one, that was cool. And the idea also has sort of, it's been years where you divide up the English readings of the Seder. That's another thing. The biggest thing about the Seder, and I won't add to your list because I think it's got everything in it. And the main thing about the list that I love is it means don't just do this thing, prepare to do this thing. And this isn't a dinner. That's where people get all nuts about this. They don't understand it. It's not a dinner, it's a ritual. And I think it's the perfect Jewish ritual. I think, in fact, Passover is, for me, the annual visit to the Jewish cardiologist to see about the Jewish heart. To me, the number of Jews who do Seders is the exact number of whether the Jewish people will survive or not. That's it. I think if that number increases, that's good for us. The more Seders, the better. The fewer Seders, the more the danger. Because the ads that I see from delis and other places, come and pick up your Passover meal. It's not a meal, it's a ritual, and you can do what you can, even if you don't want to cook and pick up the stuff, that's fine. But make sure that the experience is not about a dinner, that it's something more than that. So to me, the most important thing about the Seder are the number of Jews who have one. If that number goes down, and there's no way to know this because we don't do this kind of survey, but there is a number. And if that number, my prayer is always, may the number go up. Because I think it's a perfect ritual. First of all, it's the home, not the synagogue. Shows us that it's a mikdash ma'at, a little synagogue. Secondly, it gives children a real role, not just a throwaway thing. The 4 questions are always traditionally asked by the youngest child there. Finding of the afikomen is always a kid's thing to do. And of course, the songs. Dayenu is a wonderful song that kids can lead and that we can all joyously participate in. And so I love it. Also, because I'm a big interfaith guy, I love the fact that in the springtime, up against Easter, we've got our best #1 hitter in the lineup, which is Passover. I'm always uncomfortable, always. And you know, I'm not a Hanukkah fan. So for me, Hanukkah versus Christmas is a complete wipeout of Hanukkah by Christmas and all of its beauty and songs. And you can't just have Dreidel Dreidel up against Ave Maria and Handel's Messiah and expect to come out with a victory. But in the springtime, we have good odds, because I think the Passover Seder is just beautiful. It's something that's popular among particularly non-Jews. Christians love it because it's actually part of their tradition as well. According to Matthew, Luke, and Marc, the Last Supper of Jesus was a Passover meal. John has a different view of it. It was before the Passover for him, but this idea of the Last Supper, which of course for Christians morphs into the Eucharist, the blood, the wine of the meal becomes the blood of Jesus, and the matzah, the unleavened bread, becomes the body, which is, by the way, why for Catholics, their Eucharist wafer is a matzah. It's an unleavened thing. For Eastern Rite Christians, Eastern Orthodox, it's they still use leavened bread. But so there's that similarity, that it's the same time of the year always. By the calculations of Christianity, Easter is always near Passover. It also has in it the same name. It's Pascha and Pesach. It's got eggs in both. It's got lamb in both. Lamb is a meal, entree offering in Easter. And of course, we have the lamb shank, which is symbolic of the offering. And we don't eat lamb anymore, which was a big change, because in the Bible, in the Torah's representation of the Seder, it is a lamb that you took into your house on the first day of the month, slaughtered it on the 14th, the 15th day you ate it with matzah and bitter herbs. It was probably like a burrito. It was like a lamb. It was like a gyro sandwich. That's what it was, but it changed, the menu changed. And so I like the connection between the two. It also is theologically the most existentially deep. Most holidays, they just say this was happened then and that time ago, and it happened, we wandered, we had tents in the desert, we had booths. And this one is different. This is Ba'avur zeh asad Adonai li b'tzeitimi Mitzrayim. This is all because of what God did for me when I left Egypt. That's what we're commanded to say. But that's, of course, wrong. We never left Egypt. So what we're saying is something that isn't true. But the point of the Seder is to make it true by, as you often say, embracing our narrative, embracing it on such a level of existential truth that you say, now, what would it mean for me to say, I'm leaving Egypt now? Maybe it would mean you would have to look in the root meaning of Egypt, which is Mitzrayim is the word for Egypt, but the root meaning of Meitzar means an enclosed slot canyon where you have to, you're scrunched in between two walls of rock, which means what are the places in my life where I'm scrunched in, where I'm pushed in, and how can I get out of the constriction that are in my life and find a true land of freedom and a place of existential and psychological well-being that I might not feel now. Maybe that's the course of what it means to say, because of me. Mm-hmm. For me, I'm looking for the whole 9 yards, the full Monty. I'm looking at.
Well, so let me stop you for a second, because this, I think, is a central question of the holiday. And I think we do a wonderful job of eluding it. I certainly do, because I want to celebrate the holiday. I love the holiday. I've always loved this holiday. I love the holiday for my family. I love the holiday for the community. I love the spirit of the holiday. But at its core, at its heart, as you said beautifully, it is a theological statement. And the ultimate theological statement is we believe in a God who has a role in our history. We believe that history is modeled on this narrative. We go from place of bondage to a place of freedom. We're going from oppression to redemption. And it's our faith, Emunah Shlema, said our ancestors. It is our faith that redemption is coming. That's what the whole second half of the Seder is about. And that we believe that there's a God who's going to make sure that happens. We believe in that. We guarantee that. But those of us who are modern Jews, both because we have become secular in our way of thinking about history, we think of history as the product of social and economic and political forces, not divine forces. And because of the history of the tragedy of the 20th century, the ultimate explosion of radical evil, you find it very hard to embrace a God of history. And of course, because also we see ourselves as responsible. So help me understand, what do I say to my kid? And he will ask, because every year he asks, how can you say this? How can you talk about a God of history, about a process of redemption? Please.
Four words.
Yeah.
4 words. It's our job now. It's
okay.
Our job now. And if you want the philosophical decoration of it, here it is. God is omnipotent. God is perfect. God knows everything. But God gave us freedom of the will. Now, Leibniz went into this in great detail, but if we are truly free, what this means, if our wills are free, that means if we can choose, truly choose, A or B, what we'll do next, it means God cannot know it, Because if God knows what we're going to choose, then we aren't really free. If God knows we were going to do something, were we free to do the other thing? No. We were kind of trapped in a kind of fatalism. So the fundamental Jewish affirmation, without which we have no moral accountability or no way to really love God, both of which require freedom of the will. God understood, God learned that there were certain things that God could not know and could not even do. And that involves letting us use our free will to fix the world. By that, God understood that if it was going to be God intervening in history, like God did with a strong hand and an outstretched arm, not an angel, not a seraph, but God doing it God's self. If that's the way it is, and that's what we have to believe, you are entirely right in saying, let me off this train. Because the next bad thing that happened and God didn't do anything, why wouldn't God stop the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem in 70, or the torture of Akiba, or the Khmelnytsky pogrom, or the rise of Hitler, or anything? The answer is that if God did that, we would be sitting on our tuchuses, and we would be morally enfeebled. We would be waiting for God to fix the world and not ever using our will, our organizational strength, our patriotism, our communal connections to create a world where fascism is not possible and where evil is not possible because of our efforts. Then, at the end of our efforts, what we're saying is there is certainly no way for us to get to the finish line just on our virtue. At that point, we pray that God will re-enter history and pull us across the finish line led by the Messiah. And to again retreat to my passion of interfaith dialogue, Christians are in exactly the same position we are. We say, well, why didn't God come and do stop the Holocaust again? Because God wanted us to do it. All right. Christians have the same problem with the return of Jesus. So Jesus comes, and a lot of the signs of the Messiah, Jesus doesn't fulfill the ingathering of the exiles, resurrection of the dead, all that stuff. But they say there'll be a parousia, Paul called it a second coming, and he'll do it. Okay, so they're waiting, just like we're waiting for the Messiah to come at the end of days. But he hasn't come. And I think for the same reason, Jesus, for Christians, is probably telling Christians, do your best to fix the world so that when I come, it looks like a world that is mostly redeemed already. And I think that's the only way out of your dilemma, which is to say God learned that God's behavior in the Exodus, however dramatic, however wonderful, however thankful we are for it, could not be repeated endlessly without morally weakening the Jewish people.
Of course, I love this answer, right? Many years ago, I think almost 20 years ago now, we had a conference here in honor of Rabbi Schulweiss's 80th birthday. I need to honor Harold Schulweiss. So I went to him and I said, who are the best Jewish teachers in the world that you love, your best friends? So we put together a panel of some great teachers, David Hartman, Yitz Greenberg, Harold Kushner, David Ellenson, and some other scholars that were very close to the rabbi. And what was wonderful is that though they came from different backgrounds, Hartman and Greenberg were Orthodox, trained by Soloveitchik. Kushner and Schulweiss were conservative Reconstructionists, trained by Mordechai Kaplan. Ellenson came from Hebrew Union College. They all articulated versions of the same theology that you've just articulated. They said, look, it may have been that at a point in our history, God was involved in the same way that a parent is more involved in the life of a small child. But we are moral adults, and we must take responsibility. And the God we worship is the God that motivates, inspires, and compels us to take action in the world. The great symbol of this in the tradition itself, in fact, even in the Pesach story itself, of course, is the story of Nachshon. Right? When we get to the Red Sea and we cry to Moses, did you bring us out here to die? Moses holds his arm over the sea splits. It's wonderful in the movie. It's even better in the book. Of course, the rabbis added a little note that when Moses held the arm over the sea, it didn't split. Nothing happened. And he does it again and nothing happens. And it doesn't happen until a guy named Nachshon realizes what's going on and he jumps in the water. And when he goes all the way out and the water covers him and he begins to drown, that's when the sea splits. That's the rabbis of the Talmudic tradition saying, you got to take responsibility for history at some point. You can't just wait for the miracles of God. I love the answer with one caveat, which is that every time I heard Rabbi Schulweis teach that, and every time I've taught it, sure, every time you've taught it, somebody says to us, but doesn't that obviate the whole need for a worship of God? Where is God in that whole system? If that just becomes a form of humanism. And what I'm looking for, if not theologically, then at least emotionally, and usually it's an emotional argument, is a God who's watching out for me, a God who's taking care, a God who's our Father in heaven. How do you answer that question, that emotional question?
Okay, well, that's good. And I like that pushback because it shows the limitation of abstract theology. You know, the theology I just offered and the other rabbis taught is the true answer here, but it isn't the emotionally true answer, and you're right about that. So the response to that I would offer is that God is in history in our hope. In other words, when you are depressed and feel alone, and you feel that there is no way out of the darkness and the blue dog that you feel, God provides you with an enduring, unbreakable, constant emotional message. I love you, I'm with you. Ata imadi in the 23rd Psalm. No matter where I'm walking, even in the valley of the shadow of death, I will not fear. Ki ata imadi. The phrase that is most common in the whole Tanakh, the whole Hebrew Bible, is al tira. Mm-hmm. Do not be afraid. So that's where the emotional support comes, mm-hmm. which is God is in your heart, in your soul, to tell you not to be afraid of anything you're afraid of now. Because God will be with you, accompany you through all of your rough times, and will be with you as you come out the other end. I mean, and the other part of it is, who gave you this idea that God is a bubblegum machine dispensing toivas, dispensing good things to you? How about the other ideas that God has already given you good things, your life, your family, your parnasa, your everything. And what are you sitting around? How many times did you thank God for any of that today? So part of our prayers are thankful prayers. In fact, of all the types of prayers, when I teach children, you know, I teach them thanks, gimme, oops, and wow. Those are the only kinds of prayers. Thanks, gimme, oops, and wow. And there's only one of those prayers, one of the four types, that's asking God for anything, which is gimme. And even the gimme prayers are limited. On Shabbos, the bakashot are all taken out of the Amida. And it's very limited. The other three, you say all the time. And in fact, the rabbis say, when the Mashiach comes, all the laws will be gone except for the prayers of thanksgiving. That you still always have to say. So the thanks are for things already given. When we ask God for more, it's like the joke of the woman who's sitting on the beach with her grandson, and a wave comes and takes the kid out, and she's screaming, God, oh, help me, help me. And another wave comes back, plops the kid down, he spits out a little water and goes back to playing, and she looks up to the heavens and says he had a hat. So that idea that there's always something more that we want, that arrogance that we have, is not that you have it, because you're, as a tzaddik, you're free of this, but let me explain from people who are not tzaddikim like me. I'm telling you, the thing is to teach people all the things that they should be grateful for and how that should be in their prayer life too. And then that's just the thanks. Then there's oops and wow. How about prayers? God, help me to atone for the mistakes I've made. I'm not a perfect person, and I need your help to get over the hump there, my embarrassment and my shame. And wow, my favorite prayers are, I'm not asking for anything, God. I don't want anything. I don't need anything more than you've already given me. I'm just saying, that rainbow up there, that sunset up there, the sound of that surf crashing on the beach, those birds flying through the air, fill me with awe. Thank you. Not thank you, but wow. I am in awe of what you have given me to see and breathe and love in this world. So 3 out of the 4 kinds of birds.
Thank you. So let's finish. Everyone comes to their Seder and wants one more sort of a vort, a little something to add to their Seder. And you have always offered us some wonderful words. Let's pick a part of the Seder. Let's take the Midrash of the 4 sons. Give us something that we can share at our Seder table, Marc.
Well, thank you. You know, we've done this before, and I guess of both of them, we know we have a couple of viewers. Both of you may have heard it before, but I'm proud of this because I know I didn't write it. I got it somehow in my head. And that is the 4 sons we always think of in descending order of value and worth. It's the Chacham, Rasha, Tam, and She'eino Yodea Lishol. The 4 sons, the wise, the wicked, the simple, and the one who doesn't know how to ask. Those are the 4. And it's considered, of course, always. No one even has ever offered an alternative until Gellman. And that's the order. The wise is the best. The Rasha is second. The simple is the third. And then the one who doesn't even know how to ask is the bottom. No. It's the opposite. It's a list in reverse order. Let me explain. What does the wise son say? So right away we know that there's some clue in this. It says the wise one says, what are these testimonies, statutes, and judgments that the Lord our God commanded you? That's Deuteronomy 6:20. Well, the Rasha says you, but guess what? The wise son says to you too. So it can't be that's what makes him the wise son. They both say to you. No. This is the lowest because the answer is you can't eat the afikomen you can't eat anything after the afikomen. Well, of all of the ridiculously unimportant laws of Passover, the most ridiculously unimportant is don't eat anything after the afikomen. And if that makes someone wise, that's ridiculous. No. What the wise son is the lowest. He is the lowest because he's considering a trivial ritual to be connected to the meaning of this profoundly existential holiday. He's the lowest. The Rasha, what does he say? Lachem. What's this work to you? Well, what's wrong with that? At least that he's also excluding himself from the collective. And so the reason that he is the second is that, You say, if it was not for me, if he had been there, he wouldn't have been redeemed. What that means is, at least he recognizes that this is avodah. This isn't a ritual. This is prayer, service to God. The problem is it doesn't include him. So he isn't grateful. And that's why he's the second lowest. You can't be grateful for something that you think is for someone else. The third, Tam Mahu Amar, Mazot. This question's the shortest. What is this? And you say to him, with the strength of his hand, God took us out of Egypt from the house of slaves. So now, why is that the next highest? Because the simple son understands that the mystery of Pesach is larger than anything we do. The mystery of Pesach is about something bigger and grander and more profound. However, the simple son has no idea what this larger thing might be, because he cannot grasp the mystery he sees. The simple son is the next lowest spiritual level, but he's getting close to the highest. The highest son, the greatest son, the most righteous one, the wisest, the best, is She'eno Yodea Lishol. What do you say for him? You say for him, you shall Ba'avur Zeh, Asadonai Li B'Tzeitimi Mitzrayim. Say, this is because of what God did for me when I left Egypt. And so why is that the highest? The highest level in understanding the Passover is understanding that it is not about us asking anything from God. Passover is about sitting still. And Isaiah says, "In sitting still you shall be redeemed," and receiving the full glory of our liberation in a kind of thankfulness that asks nothing more than a freedom that has already been granted. Freedom, you see, that is like love. It does not require knowing a question to ask. Freedom, like love, is living our way into the ultimate answer.
That's a beautiful drasha. That is such a lovely drasha. Thank you.
Thank you for letting me share it.
Let's wish everyone a happy, healthy, sweet Pesach.
Yeah.
And from both of us, from Rabbi Gellman and from me, remember this, please. There's so much drama that goes on. First, there's the drama of, of cleaning the house, cooking the meal, getting ready for the holiday. And then there's the drama of sitting with a family, and especially as, politics get fraught, there's all the question of who gets invited and who doesn't get invited and who sits with who, and I can't stand that side of the family. And then there's the drama of putting on a Seder when you have different religiosities at the table. And we tend to forget in all that drama that there is a marvelous story to be told. And it's our story. And it's a story to be assimilated and internalized and cherished. It's the story of what it means to be a slave and what it means to find freedom, what it means to see that there are real possibilities in human existence, real possibilities in life, that there are real responsibilities upon us and real blessings to share with those around us. So please, this year, clean the kitchen, do a good job, and do the shopping, do a good job, and make peace with your family, do a good job at that. But take a moment to gather in the power of this story, all of its power, all of its poetry, and take a moment to reflect, as Rabbi Gellman said, on its mystery, on its power, on its importance. Give thanks. That's what Dayenu is, giving thanks. And enjoy a sweet and healthy, happy Pesach. Marc, to you and yours.
You and yours.
A happy
Aziz Pesach, my friend. And
Amen.
to all those who spend time listening to us, thank you so much. And a happy Passover to you and your families.